Self-awareness is often a pivotal ingredient in personal development, emotional well-being, and overall mental resilience. People frequently use the term to signify a state of knowing who you are, or being in tune with yourself, suggesting that self-awareness touches on identity, emotional recognition, and interpersonal conduct. Yet beneath these everyday usages lies a richly layered construct, one that philosophers, theologians, and psychologists have contemplated for centuries. Self-awareness involves the capacity to reflect on one's thoughts, feelings, motivations, and behaviors with clarity, and it stands as a cornerstone of emotional intelligence, moral reasoning, and social responsibility. By gaining insight into how we function internally, we learn to adapt to external demands and refine our interactions with the world. Nonetheless, self-awareness can be a double-edged sword. Its positive outcomes include personal growth, empathy, and better decision-making, while excessive introspection can lead to rumination, anxiety, and self-absorption. Because the concept has so many facets, psychologists track how self-recognition unfolds in infancy and deepens across adolescence, while neuroscientists investigate the brain networks responsible for introspection and self-referential thinking. Cultural anthropologists focus on how societal norms and linguistic factors shape how people become or avoid becoming self-aware. Clinicians see self-awareness as central to many therapeutic modalities.
You are about to know the thrill of seeing that which has never been seen before. You are about to enter a beautiful, exciting, wonderful new world. The world of...
Encouraging patients to recognize unconscious drives, automatic thoughts, and suppressed emotions. Meanwhile, leadership experts and organizational theorists identify self-awareness as a pillar of effective management, team cohesion, and ethical decision-making. The quest to know oneself has captivated human beings for millennia, as evidenced by the inscription at the Temple of Apollo in Delphi urging visitors to know thyself. Ancient Egyptian writings also contained early reflections on the introspective life, associating moral rectitude with an honest appraisal of one's heart and mind. In Greece, philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle treated self-awareness as essential to virtue and wisdom, encouraging dialogues that probed the nature of the self, the soul, and the moral consequences of knowledge. Socratic inquiry routinely pushed interlocutors to examine the assumptions they held about virtue, justice, or love, implying that a lack of self-awareness paved the way for misguided actions. Aristotle proposed a eudaimonic life, one rooted in the pursuit of excellence and moral virtue, which presupposed a commitment to reflection on personal strengths and weaknesses. Meanwhile, in Hellenistic schools, such as Stoicism and Epicureanism, practitioners were enjoined to examine their inner dispositions continuously, recognizing that emotional distress often stemmed from false beliefs or distorted self-views. Eastern traditions also articulated robust frameworks for self-awareness. Early Buddhist texts delineated mindfulness as a means to alleviate suffering by understanding the impermanent and interdependent nature of all phenomena, including the self. Practitioners were urged to scrutinize each moment's arising thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without clinging or aversion. The ultimate aspiration was to see through the illusion of a permanent, unchanging I, thus attaining enlightenment. Taoism similarly focused on cultivating naturalness, ziran, and alignment with the Tao, requiring practitioners to remain keenly aware of their actions and mental states while flowing with the rhythms of the cosmos. Confucian teachings emphasized self-cultivation in the context of social harmony, suggesting that self-awareness, sincerity, and proper conduct would create virtuous individuals who contributed to a just society. In the medieval era, Theological perspectives often framed self-awareness as an avenue for perceiving the divine spark within the human soul. Christian mystics like Augustine wrote autobiographically about their struggles with sin, desire, and humility, viewing introspection as a tool to uncover God's presence. Bernard of Clairvaux, Teresa of Avila, and John of the Cross similarly combined introspective prayer with moral and spiritual guidance, contending that true knowledge of God hinged on earnest self-examination of one's faults and virtues. By the Renaissance, individual identity took on renewed significance. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci and Albrecht Dürer produced self-portraits that symbolized a heightened interest in personal identity. Philosophers in the Enlightenment then recast self-awareness in empirical and rationalist terms. René Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, asserted the thinking self as the indubitable foundation of all knowledge. This watershed moment propelled the Western tradition toward analyzing consciousness itself, planting seeds for debates on whether subjective experience and self-reflection could form the backbone of epistemology. Empiricists like John Locke also contended that personal identity was grounded in consciousness and memory, meaning that self-awareness formed the linchpin of one's sense of continuity over time. 19th century existentialists, including Søren Kierkegaard and Friedrich Nietzsche, radically re-examined self-awareness by interrogating the authenticity of one's existence. Kierkegaard underscored the individual's inward relationship to truth, positing that self-awareness fostered an authentic life that stood apart from societal dictates. Nietzsche, meanwhile, declared that God is dead and that humans must create their values. His work challenged people to embrace self-examination and self-mastery, avoiding moral herd mentalities. Psychoanalysis, pioneered by Sigmund Freud at the turn of the 20th century, approached self-awareness via the unconscious mind. Freud asserted that genuine self-knowledge required confronting hidden drives, repressed memories, and conflicts lying beyond everyday consciousness. Carl Jung extended these ideas, adding archetypes and the collective unconscious, which implied that each person carried universal psychological motifs that influenced one's inner life. In the latter half of the 20th century, humanistic psychologists like Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers emphasized personal growth, self-actualization, and unconditional positive regard, situating self-awareness as a central mechanism in achieving higher states of well-being. Maslow's hierarchy of needs culminated in self-actualization, which presupposed intimate awareness of one's desires and capabilities. Rogers believed therapy should revolve around helping clients become more aware of their feelings, values, and self-concepts, thus enabling more authentic and positive behavior. These historical and philosophical underpinnings reveal self-awareness to be a recurring theme that has adapted over centuries to shifting moral, spiritual, and intellectual currents. For some thinkers, knowledge of the self is the path to moral virtue. For others, it is a route toward liberation from ego or social conditioning. In modern psychological parlance, many of these ideas have laid the groundwork for empirical studies on cognition, memory, and personality, underscoring the timeless fascination with the question of who we are when we look inward. Developmental roots, childhood and adolescence. The seeds of self-awareness are planted in infancy and gradually blossom through childhood. Developmental psychologists have long been intrigued by when exactly a child begins to realize that it is an individual separate from the environment. An influential experiment in this vein is the mirror test, popularized by Gordon Gallup. Researchers place a mark, such as a dot of rouge, on an infant's forehead and then observe how the child behaves in front of a mirror. Children who try to wipe the mark from their forehead rather than reaching for the reflection demonstrate that they recognize the mirrored image as themselves. Typically, children start passing this test between 18 and 24 months, though there is variation across cultures and individual differences. This milestone represents a rudimentary form of self-recognition. At around the same stage, toddlers develop language that reflects self-identity, such as using first-person pronouns, I, me, or referring to themselves by name. This simultaneous linguistic and cognitive development suggests that recognizing oneself visually and labeling oneself verbally reinforce an emergent sense of self. As children grow, their self-awareness becomes more complex. They not only recognize themselves in a mirror, but can also describe basic traits, preferences, and emotional states. By early childhood, a key cognitive leap occurs, the development of a theory of mind. This capacity involves understanding that others have their thoughts, desires, and emotions, which can differ from one's own. Through interactions with siblings, parents, and peers, children learn that minds are distinct. Theory of mind is closely intertwined with self-awareness, because to recognize that others have separate perspectives, one must also perceive the individuality of one's perspective. Emotional self-awareness evolves during these early years as well. A 5-year-old who can say, "I'm upset because my friend took my toy," is demonstrating a more sophisticated grasp of internal states than a toddler who simply cries. As a child's emotional vocabulary expands, so does their ability to reflect on personal feelings. Family contexts play a major role in how effectively children develop emotional introspection. Households that promote open discussions of emotions and gently guide children to label and manage them foster deeper self-awareness. Adolescence introduces heightened self-consciousness, partly due to hormonal changes and partly because teens begin to compare themselves more explicitly to peers. Psychologists have observed phenomena such as the imaginary audience, where adolescents feel as though the entire world is scrutinizing them, and the personal fable, where they see themselves as uniquely special or invulnerable. These tendencies can intensify public self-awareness, sometimes culminating in social anxiety or self-doubt, but also spurring identity formation. Erik Erikson's model of psychosocial development pinpoints adolescence as a critical period for forging personal identity, a process requiring substantial introspection about values, aspirations, and self-image. As adolescents move into young adulthood, self-awareness typically broadens, enabling them to consider abstract qualities of the self, spiritual or ideological commitments, moral convictions, career aspirations, and to reconcile these with external pressures. College students or young professionals, for instance, often wrestle with the gap between who they currently are and who they believe they should be, a tension that can fuel both personal growth and temporary crises of self-confidence. Throughout this developmental journey, cultural and societal factors wield significant influence. In Western societies that emphasize individuality, children might be encouraged to stand out and become more aware of their talents or interests. In contrast, more collectivistic cultures may instill self-awareness that is deeply attuned to family obligations or community harmony. Each context nudges children and adolescents to reflect on themselves in ways consistent with prevailing values. Thus, the emergence of self-awareness is not a purely internal phenomenon, but is shaped by an interlocking matrix of biological maturation, social interactions, and cultural scripts. Neurobiology of self-awareness. Contemporary neuroscience offers insights into the brain regions and networks associated with self-awareness. Rather than locating a single self-awareness center, researchers emphasize the interplay among multiple areas involved in perception, memory, executive control, and emotional processing. Functional magnetic resonance. Imaging, fMRI, studies often highlight the medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC, when subjects engage in tasks requiring personal judgment, introspection, or self-referential thought. Individuals asked to assess how well certain traits or adjectives apply to them, for example, typically show increased MPFC activity. The posterior cingulate cortex, PCC, and adjacent precuneus region are also implicated. These areas, along with the MPFC, constitute part of the default mode network, DMN, which activates when a person is not focused on external tasks, but rather letting the mind wander to personal memories, daydreams, or self-reflection. Interestingly, the DMN tends to quiet down when attention shifts to goal-directed activities such as problem-solving or external vigilance. This suggests that the brain naturally defaults to an internally oriented stance, scanning personal experiences and possible futures when not otherwise occupied. The anterior insula is another region relevant to self-awareness, as it processes interoceptive signals, messages about internal bodily states, including heartbeat, muscle tension, and visceral responses. Such interoceptive awareness is crucial to emotional self-awareness. For instance, detecting a rapid heart rate and linking it to anxiety or excitement exemplifies the function of the insula, which translates raw bodily data into psychological awareness. The right hemisphere has also been traditionally linked to self-recognition based on lesion studies and mirror tests, though current research underscores a more distributed neural basis. Social neuroscience findings reveal that many neural networks used for self-referential thinking overlap with those for understanding others' mental states, often referred to as mentalizing or theory of mind. This overlap indicates that self-awareness and empathy rely on partially shared circuits, reinforcing the idea that introspection and social cognition are interdependent. Enhancements in self-awareness can thus positively affect interpersonal sensitivity, while profound deficits in self-reflection may limit the ability to appreciate others' experiences. Neuroplasticity provides a hopeful dimension to this research. Evidence shows that individuals practicing mindfulness meditation, for instance, can alter connectivity within the default mode network or bolster the executive networks that regulate attention. These changes may reduce tendencies to ruminate or fixate on negative self-perceptions. In a broader sense, repeated introspective practices can re-sculpt neural pathways, making self-awareness not only a psychological skill, but also a biological state shaped by training and habit. Social and cultural influences. Although brain wiring and developmental biology are fundamental, self-awareness blossoms within social and cultural frameworks. Children learn how to interpret their emotions and behaviors partly by observing how parents, teachers, and peers respond to them. When caregivers validate a child's internal experiences, acknowledging sadness, anger, or excitement, the child gains confidence in examining these states. On the other hand, being ridiculed or punished for expressing vulnerability can inhibit introspection, causing emotional suppression rather than healthy self-reflection. Peer relationships become crucial in later childhood and adolescence. Fitting in with a group or earning social approval can heighten awareness of how one appears to others. This sense of public self-awareness can motivate adaptive social behavior, but it can also create performance anxiety or lead individuals to conform inauthentically. As technology evolves, social media platforms amplify this phenomenon. Constantly exposing individuals to curated images of others' lives, social media entices them to compare their bodies, achievements, and personalities. Such ceaseless comparison can distort self-perception, fostering excessive self-consciousness. Yet social media can also serve as a venue for self-expression, enabling some users to explore facets of their identity and discover supportive communities. Cultural context plays a profound role in how self-awareness is cultivated and expressed. In individualistic societies, often exemplified by many Western cultures, self-awareness is frequently tied to personal uniqueness, achievement, and self-expression. The person is viewed as an autonomous agent whose internal states matter for forging an independent path. In collectivistic cultures, prevalent in East Asia, parts of Africa, and certain Latin American societies, Awareness of one's own emotions and behaviors is often interlaced with awareness of how those emotions and behaviors affect the group. One's identity is not isolated, but is embedded within familial, communal, or even national networks. Neither model is universally superior. Each shapes the trajectory of self-awareness in distinctive ways. Individuals raised in collectivistic settings may excel at taking others' perspectives and regulating their behavior for group harmony, while those in individualistic settings might cultivate an assertive sense of personal identity but risk overlooking communal obligations. Languages also encode cultural emphases. Some languages possess a rich emotional lexicon with fine distinctions among types of sadness or love, potentially deepening introspective nuance. Others rely on broader emotional categories, which might direct self-awareness toward a more generalized sense of well-being or discomfort. Religious traditions, local customs, gender roles, and socio-economic conditions further calibrate how people approach introspection. A young man in a culture that prizes stoicism may learn to mask his emotional complexities, whereas a child in a community that celebrates open emotional sharing may grow more comfortable articulating nuanced inner states. Intersecting with these social and cultural lenses are issues of race, ethnicity, sexuality, ability, and other identity dimensions. Marginalized groups often develop what W.E.B. Du Bois called double consciousness, an awareness of how one appears both through the lens of one's cultural group and the lens of the dominant society. This heightened sense of being perceived, judged, or stereotyped can lead to stress or resilience, depending on individual coping strategies and community support systems. Benefits of self-awareness. Self-awareness is prized for its multifaceted benefits. At the emotional level, it fosters the ability to regulate mood and respond to stressors with composure. A person who detects early signs of anger, such as a racing heart or clenched jaw, can adopt calming techniques before the anger escalates into destructive actions. Similarly, noticing the onset of anxiety might prompt someone to use relaxation exercises or cognitive reframing. This emotional regulation fortifies psychological resilience, allowing individuals to bounce back more readily from setbacks. Decision-making also hinges on clarity regarding personal values, desires, and aversions. Self-awareness helps individuals move beyond reflexive choices or societal pressures, leading them to discern whether a particular career path aligns with their core passions. Such alignment fosters a sense of fulfillment that might otherwise be elusive. Moreover, self-aware persons can set achievable goals, reflect on incremental progress, and pivot strategies when encountering obstacles. Another salient advantage lies in how self-awareness enhances interpersonal relationships. By recognizing one's emotional triggers, communication styles, and conflict tendencies, a person becomes more capable of honest dialogue with friends, partners, or co-workers. Misunderstandings diminish when people can openly state, "I am feeling defensive right now because this topic reminds me of a past frustration," which encourages empathy and problem solving. Indeed, empathy itself is often seen as an outgrowth of self-awareness. By understanding one's emotional states, one gains insight into the emotional experiences of others. In professional spheres, self-awareness is increasingly valued. Managers and leaders who understand their strengths, weaknesses, and leadership styles are better positioned to motivate and inspire teams. They can delegate tasks in a manner that plays to each team member's talents, solicit feedback to correct blind spots, and handle conflict with emotional poise. Subordinates tend to trust leaders who visibly reflect on their decisions and treat mistakes as learning opportunities rather than failings to be hidden. Beyond these interpersonal and professional spheres, self-awareness can foster moral and ethical growth. When one is acutely aware of how actions affect other people, or how personal biases shape perception, one is more likely to act in ways that align with a sense of justice and compassion. This aspect resonates with historical, philosophical, and religious emphases. Understanding oneself leads to virtuous or enlightened behavior. Self-awareness may also protect mental health when harnessed constructively. By identifying early signs of depression or anxiety, an individual might seek support, adjust habits, or adopt coping practices before the condition worsens. Engaging in activities such as gratitude journaling, self-reflective writing, or mindful breathing can maintain emotional equilibrium. Over time, the synergy of these benefits can yield a life lived with greater intentionality, clarity, and connection. Potential pitfalls and negative aspects. Despite its strengths, self-awareness can turn counterproductive if unbalanced, obsessive, or poorly managed. One common pitfall is rumination, the habit of replaying distressing or self-critical thoughts relentlessly. Rather than leading to resolutions, rumination can spiral into anxiety or depression, robbing the individual of present-moment engagement. By magnifying flaws or regrets, excessive introspection can overshadow constructive growth, generating a sense of paralysis or hopelessness. Analysis paralysis is a related problem that occurs when constant self-examination halts decision-making. In trying to make the perfect choice, individuals may weigh every minute possibility, ultimately failing to act. This indecisiveness can hamper both personal progress and professional success, especially in time-sensitive domains that demand swift yet reasonably informed decisions. Social anxiety also arises when self-awareness morphs into hyper-awareness of how others might judge one's appearance, speech, or performance. People may withdraw from social encounters or professional opportunities out of fear that they will be scrutinized. While a dose of public self-awareness can help individuals align with social etiquette, its extreme form can sever them from enriching relationships and hamper career advancement. Another paradoxical hazard is narcissistic or egotistical self-focus, in which individuals obsessively contemplate themselves yet never question their shortcomings. Rather than healthy introspection, this mindset rationalizes self-centric behavior and dismisses feedback that challenges the inflated self-image. Such an approach stymies empathy, leaving relationships shallow and strained. Loss of spontaneity is a subtler drawback. When people constantly monitor their internal states or external impressions, social interactions may feel forced or scripted, undermining genuine human connection. The quest to present the ideal self can overshadow authenticity, as the individual becomes preoccupied with micromanaging every word or gesture. Detachment or depersonalization can also manifest as a byproduct of excessive introspection. Constantly picking apart one's thoughts and sensations might produce a subjective distance from the flow of life, as if one is perpetually an observer rather than a participant. Individuals may complain of feeling unreal or that experiences pass them by without full immersion. In some cases, self-awareness raises recognition of unproductive habits or personal limitations, but the individual fails to enact change. The gulf between knowledge and action can lead to frustration, guilt, or self-loathing. For instance, someone might realize they procrastinate out of fear of failure, but never adopt time management techniques or seek counseling. This discrepancy underscores that self-awareness, for all its virtues, must be coupled with initiative and behavioral shifts to avoid breeding additional psychological burdens. Mental health implications. Self-awareness intersects with mental health in ways that can foster recovery or exacerbate distress. When properly channeled, insight into personal triggers, thought patterns, or coping styles can aid in managing conditions like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Therapy sessions often revolve around building a more accurate self-concept, replacing destructive beliefs with balanced appraisals, and designing healthy coping mechanisms. For individuals dealing with trauma, being able to name and process flashbacks or intrusive memories is an essential step toward healing. Yet the reverse also holds. Conditions such as major depressive disorder or generalized anxiety can hijack introspection, turning it into pathological rumination or catastrophizing. A depressed person might endlessly replay perceived failures, concluding they are worthless. Anxious individuals may fixate on every bodily sensation as a harbinger of doom, thereby intensifying panic. Self-awareness in these scenarios becomes a trap, an echo chamber where negativity reverberates, seemingly inescapable. Certain disorders, including obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, showcase how heightened self-awareness can become a central feature of pathology. Patients often recognize the irrationality of their intrusive thoughts, but remain powerless to stop them, resulting in compulsive rituals. Similarly, in social anxiety disorder, the heightened public self-awareness fosters continuous self-scrutiny that prevents genuine participation in social contexts. Professionals therefore aim to help clients direct self-awareness more productively, whether through cognitive behavioral techniques, mindfulness, or acceptance-based therapies, all of which encourage a less judgmental and more action-oriented approach to one's inner life. In the broader realm of mental health, building supportive interpersonal networks and engaging in fulfilling activities can mitigate the dangers of excessive introspection. Volunteering, sports, artistic pursuits, and community involvement can redirect attention outward, balancing reflective moments with tangible experiences. Some mental health experts recommend scheduling worry time or timed self-reflection sessions to confine introspection to specific intervals rather than permitting it to saturate the entire day. Overall, the relationship between self-awareness and mental health is complex. While self-knowledge can guide people out of emotional turmoil, it can also deepen that turmoil if allowed to drift toward endless self-critique. Cultivating self-awareness, practices and approaches. A spectrum of techniques exists for individuals seeking to deepen their self-awareness without succumbing to its pitfalls. Among these, mindfulness meditation stands out for its ability to cultivate non-judgmental, present-moment observation. Practitioners typically start by focusing on the breath or bodily sensations, noting when the mind wanders, and gently returning attention to the chosen anchor. Over time, this practice fosters a stable vantage point from which to witness mental chatter, emotional fluctuations, and physical tension without becoming entangled. Journaling also offers a tactile, reflective process. Writing about daily experiences, emotional reactions, or personal goals can solidify nebulous thoughts, revealing previously overlooked patterns. Some people adopt free writing techniques that allow uncensored expression, while others use guided prompts, such as reflecting on the day's challenges or joys. Reading past entries can yield insights into how one's mindset evolves and highlight recurring problems that might benefit from targeted strategies. Psychotherapy is another avenue for cultivating self-awareness in a structured, supportive context. Depending on the theoretical orientation, a therapist might guide clients in exploring childhood experiences, psychodynamic, challenge irrational beliefs, cognitive behavioral, or employ acceptance strategies that integrate mindfulness, third-wave therapies like acceptance and commitment therapy. A counselor's outside perspective can illuminate blind spots, while the therapeutic alliance offers safety for exploring vulnerable emotions. Even short-term therapy can sharpen self-knowledge, particularly for individuals who have never methodically examined their inner life. Peer feedback or support groups represent alternatives to formal therapy. Sharing personal stories in a trusted circle can bring validation, empathy, and viewpoints that highlight behavioral patterns. In professional settings, 360-degree feedback collects input from supervisors, colleagues, and subordinates, giving employees a multifaceted perspective on their communication, leadership style, and interpersonal effectiveness. Although receiving constructive criticism may be uncomfortable, it often prompts valuable introspection. Creative pursuits also lend themselves to self-discovery. By painting, dancing, composing music, or crafting narratives, individuals tap into subconscious imagery or emotional undercurrents that might elude ordinary rumination. Engaging the body through exercise or somatic practices like yoga, tai chi, or qigong similarly integrates bodily awareness with mental reflection, emphasizing the synergy between physical posture and emotional well-being. For many, stepping outside familiar routines by traveling or learning new skills awakens fresh aspects of self-awareness, as confronting novel environments can expose hidden assumptions or reveal adaptive strengths. Whatever practice or combination of practices one adopts, consistency is key. Sporadic journaling or occasional meditation may offer fleeting insights, but truly transformative self-awareness emerges from repeated efforts over time. Patience, self-compassion, and a willingness to embrace occasional discomfort can make the difference between ephemeral curiosity and meaningful growth. Balancing self-awareness in everyday life. The challenge is not merely to cultivate self-awareness, but to integrate it wisely into daily routines, relationships, and pursuits. Striking a balance allows introspection to remain constructive rather than lapsing into rumination or superficial self-absorption. One tactic is setting clear intentions whenever turning inward. Perhaps the individual decides to spend 10 minutes each evening writing about the day's emotional highlights, along with any steps for improving tomorrow's interactions. Having a defined purpose prevents introspection from devolving into endless worry. Equally important is the shift from problem-focused thinking to solution-focused thinking. Recognizing one's procrastination habit is only the first step. Investigating underlying anxieties or perfectionistic beliefs becomes crucial, followed by drafting concrete, incremental goals. This transition from awareness to action ensures that insights yield real-world benefits, whether in personal health, professional tasks, or social realms. In many cases, externalizing attention can restore balance. Spending time volunteering, joining clubs, or participating in community events shifts the mental spotlight from the self to broader concerns. Physical activities such as jogging, team sports, or dance also anchor awareness in the body, lessening the lure of incessant mental chatter. Gratitude practices further boost positivity and perspective, directing attention to blessings and achievements instead of magnifying perceived shortcomings. Self-compassion stands as a foundation for balanced introspection. When noticing a personal flaw or regret, harsh self-judgment can exacerbate shame or defensiveness. Approaching these realizations with gentleness and an understanding that imperfection is universal fosters emotional openness. Self-compassion neither denies accountability nor promotes complacency. It simply reframes mistakes as opportunities to learn rather than moral indictments. Accompanied by the support of friends, mentors, or mental health professionals, self-compassion helps anchor individuals in a realistic yet hopeful appraisal of who they are. When signs of imbalance appear, such as repetitive negative thinking, persistent social avoidance, or ignoring responsibilities, seeking guidance can be life-changing. Therapists can provide strategies for regulating self-awareness, while mentors or close friends can offer unbiased observations. The journey toward healthy self-awareness thus requires ongoing vigilance and adaptation, recognizing that changes in life circumstances or mental health status may shift one's needs. Self-awareness in leadership and organizations. The capacity for self-awareness resonates strongly in leadership contexts. Leaders who lack introspection can inflict chaos on their teams, making decisions driven by ego, bias, or emotional reactivity. Conversely, leaders who exhibit balanced self-awareness are often better at building trust, collaborating with diverse personalities, and inspiring loyalty. When a leader understands how stress influences their communication style, they can avoid misdirected frustration and keep morale intact. Likewise, when leaders acknowledge knowledge gaps, they more readily delegate tasks to team members with complementary expertise, boosting collective productivity. Modern organizational development frequently stresses emotional intelligence as a crucial leadership trait. Training programs may incorporate reflective exercises, peer feedback, and coaching sessions to sharpen self-awareness. Some companies institutionalize regular check-ins or reviews, encouraging employees at all levels to examine their motivations, performance, and interpersonal dynamics. These initiatives not only improve the effectiveness of leaders but also trickle down, fostering a workplace culture that values openness, empathy, and continuous learning. Nonetheless, leaders can fall into pitfalls if they overanalyze, second-guessing decisions to the point of undermining organizational momentum. Another danger is excessive self-criticism that erodes confidence, a condition sometimes referred to as imposter syndrome, where capable leaders doubt their legitimacy. On the other end of the spectrum, leaders might indulge in grandiose self-perceptions that dismiss honest feedback as misguided or subordinate employees as less competent. Striking equilibrium involves combining self-reflection with humility and a willingness to engage in transparent communication. Organizational cultures that reward introspection without penalizing mistakes create environments where self-awareness can thrive. Employees are more likely to speak candidly about challenges and propose innovations when they see leaders openly acknowledging their lessons learned. Conversely, punitive cultures inhibit authentic self-awareness as people mask weaknesses or deflect accountability to avoid retribution. The synergy between organizational norms and personal self-awareness is therefore critical. Even a highly introspective individual can be stifled in a hostile or blame-oriented setting, whereas an organization that celebrates reflection can nudge even reluctant members toward deeper self-knowledge. Reflections on avoiding excess and harnessing gains. Given the potential for both growth and harm, self-awareness calls for thoughtful cultivation. One of the most straightforward lessons is recognizing that knowledge of the self does not guarantee behavioral change. People might fully realize that they tend to lash out under stress or procrastinate when intimidated by a task, yet repeat these patterns if no proactive measures are taken. The translation of self-knowledge into action demands deliberate effort, planning, and often external resources or support. In some cases, accountability partners or mentors can help ensure follow-through, reinforcing that awareness alone is not the finish line. Another key is adopting a growth mindset, as articulated by psychologist Carol Dweck. This mindset reframes mistakes or gaps in skill as opportunities for learning rather than permanent flaws. By applying a growth-oriented approach, individuals can confront their imperfections, revealed by introspection, without feeling defeated or paralyzed. Emotional agility, championed by Harvard psychologist Susan David, complements this outlook by encouraging people to name their emotions accurately, accept their presence, and act in alignment with personal values. Emotional agility underscores that feeling sad or anxious is not inherently wrong. It is how one responds to these emotions that matters. Supportive networks, friends, family, colleagues, or communities serve as practical catalysts. Discussing personal insights in a safe environment helps normalize the ups and downs of introspection, preventing isolation. When individuals feel that others genuinely care about their growth, they are more likely to sustain reflective habits without tipping into self-criticism or denial. On a larger scale, philanthropic activities or social engagement offer the chance to shift focus outward, bridging self-awareness with empathy for others' realities. In some instances, it is beneficial to limit how much one dwells on introspective analyses. Scheduling reflective exercises can confine introspection, particularly for those prone to anxious rumination. If negative thinking re-emerges outside the set time, they might mentally note the thought and gently postpone it until the scheduled reflection slot, minimizing mental overload. This technique can prevent introspection from hijacking entire days or nights. Fostering self-compassion is an essential safeguard. Christine Neff's research on self-compassion highlights three components: treating oneself kindly rather than harshly, recognizing that suffering is part of a common human experience, and balancing negative thoughts by keeping them in perspective. Taken together, these elements curb the risk of self-awareness morphing into self-flagellation. They also encourage curiosity, a stance that sees personal failings as transitory states rather than fixed definitions. Self-awareness emerges as a remarkable human capacity, the ability to peer inward, comprehend our motives and emotions, and reflect on how we appear to others. Its historical roots stretch from the Know Thyself inscriptions of ancient Greece and the meditative traditions of the East to modern psychological frameworks that track cognition, emotion, and social interaction. Throughout this long lineage, self-awareness has been hailed as a gateway to wisdom, moral virtue, emotional balance, and personal liberation. It has also been flagged as a potential source of isolation, narcissism, or paralyzing introspection if not governed sensibly. Modern psychology and neuroscience amplify these understandings by delineating the brain regions involved, charting child and adolescent development, and highlighting how cultural contexts shape the expression of self-awareness. We have learned that families, peer groups, and entire societies teach us how to look inward, for how long and to what end. Self-awareness, then, is not a static or purely private phenomenon. It blossoms in an ecosystem of social feedback, institutional norms, and cultural narratives. Despite the wide-ranging benefits, improved emotional regulation, enhanced relationships, ethical clarity, and effective leadership, self-awareness can be undermined by rumination, social anxiety, or a crippling sense of self-doubt. Avoiding these pitfalls requires deliberate strategies. Mindfulness, therapy, journaling, and creative arts can expand personal insight, but they must be coupled with checks against excessive self-focus. Goal setting, solution-oriented reflection, outward engagement, and robust social support can keep introspection balanced. Self-compassion, in particular, ensures that when painful truths about one's flaws come to light, they are met with kindness and a desire to grow rather than condemnation. In leadership and organizational settings, self-awareness stands as both a shield against hubris and a catalyst for collaboration. Leaders aware of their blind spots invite feedback, adapt their behavior, and demonstrate accountability, traits that resonate with employees and stakeholders. However, leaders also risk imposter syndrome or overconfidence if they fail to align introspection with supportive structures. Organizations that encourage reflection, empathy, and transparent communication often reap the advantages of a self-aware workforce that communicates effectively and innovates freely. Ultimately, self-awareness is not a finish line, but an evolving endeavor. As we move through life stages, childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, midlife, and beyond, our internal landscapes shift. Fresh experiences, new responsibilities, and unforeseen challenges necessitate continuous re-examination of who we are and how we respond. Rather than viewing self-awareness as an achievement or a label, we can see it as an ongoing conversation with ourselves. By listening attentively, we catch whispers of dreams or regrets. By responding proactively, we shape our character, build meaningful relationships, and contribute to society. The dynamic interplay of these inner dialogues and outer actions is where self-awareness flourishes as a tool for thoughtful, compassionate living. The essence of self-awareness thus lies not in a final, conclusive knowledge of self, but in a perpetual willingness to look inward and outward, refining one's sense of identity in tandem with the changing world. Engaging in that process with balance and responsibility holds the promise of deeper understanding, emotional well-being, and ethical participation in community life. If knowing thyself was the ancient admonition, perhaps the modern corollary is continuing to know thyself, a reminder that self-awareness is both a journey and a practice, one that can illuminate our paths through uncertainty and complexity. By forging a gentle equilibrium between introspection and external engagement, we ensure that this extraordinary human capacity remains a guiding light rather than a burden. Self-awareness is widely regarded as a positive, even necessary trait for personal growth and emotional intelligence. It refers to the ability to observe one's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, often leading to clearer communication and self-improvement. Yet there is a lesser explored dimension of self-awareness that can be detrimental when taken to extremes. While most people benefit from a balanced level of introspection, an excess of self-awareness may result in anxiety, social inhibition, and emotional exhaustion. By understanding why too much self-awareness can be problematic, individuals can strive to develop a healthier relationship with their inner reflections. Excessive self-awareness frequently manifests as overthinking. In day-to-day life, a moderate degree of introspection helps people recognize emotions and consider actions before taking them. However, when that mental scrutiny never shuts off, individuals can become trapped in internal dialogues that replay mistakes, question every step, or magnify trivial concerns. For instance, someone who meticulously analyzes each conversation might recall and dissect every phrase they uttered to discern whether they sounded foolish, missed a chance to impress, or gave the wrong impression. Rather than using introspection to learn and move on, they can spend hours or even days dwelling on small details. This rumination seldom yields positive outcomes. In reality, it immobilizes decision-making and stokes anxiety, as the person becomes stuck in a loop of self-critique, unable to focus on constructive tasks or enjoy everyday life. Social interactions can become a battleground for overly self-aware people. Instead of being present in conversations or spontaneous in group activities, they remain hyper-vigilant about how others perceive them. They might scrutinize every gesture, tone of voice, or facial expression, while constantly guessing what onlookers think about them. This heightened sensitivity can breed self-consciousness or social anxiety, leading them to withdraw from gatherings they want to attend, or to speak less freely when they do show up. Paradoxically, their excessive concern about making a good impression may result in the opposite effect. Nervousness, stilted speech, or visible discomfort can make them appear unapproachable, precisely because their fixation on how they are perceived interferes with authentic social connection. Rather than facilitating clear communication, their acute self-monitoring obstructs the flow of genuine interaction. Emotional well-being can also suffer when self-awareness borders on obsession. Although awareness of inner states is often linked to healthier responses to stress, too much inward focus can amplify negative moods. A fleeting sense of sadness may become a catalyst for dissecting personal failures. Minor frustrations can evolve into emotional spirals if the individual unceasingly examines why they felt upset, whether it reveals a deeper flaw, or how it might lead to broader problems in relationships or career paths. The mental energy consumed by such rumination can be staggering. Rather than moving on from a difficult moment, the person remains fixated, reliving small annoyances and feeding a narrative of self-doubt or self-criticism. Over time, this persistent negative reflection can contribute to depression, anxiety disorders, or a generalized sense of hopelessness. Another consequence of extreme self-awareness is the erosion of spontaneity and creativity. When people are excessively attuned to how they look, sound, and appear to others, they may refrain from natural expressions of self that appear imperfect or unpolished. This hesitancy can stifle original thinking in work environments that depend on innovation and bold ideas. People might shy away from proposing new strategies or creative solutions, fearing that their suggestions will be ridiculed or dismissed. Artistic pursuits, such as drawing, writing, or music, may also be inhibited because an overly self-conscious person critiques each stroke of paint, every sentence, or each note to the point of paralysis. The joy and discovery inherent in creative acts can be replaced by anxiety about whether the end product matches an imagined ideal, dampening both risk-taking and artistic fulfillment. In relationships, a perpetual focus on oneself can become burdensome for both partners and friends. Emotional availability and the capacity to listen to others are essential for healthy connections. However, extreme self-awareness can translate into a tendency to monopolize conversations with personal worries and doubts, or to be so consumed by one's internal monologue that one fails to hear the needs or perspectives of loved ones. While this might not stem from intentional selfishness, indeed it often comes from anxiety, the constant self-focus can erode empathy, leaving friends or partners feeling sidelined. Over time, interpersonal tensions may rise if the individual is perceived as self-absorbed or incapable of mutual emotional support. A more insidious effect of being too self-aware is the potential to slip into a self-fulfilling prophecy of inadequacy. Someone who is always on guard for errors or deficiencies in themselves may start to see evidence of these flaws everywhere they look. If they believe they are socially awkward, they might fixate on fleeting awkward moments, mentally reviewing them so often that they feel even more convinced of their shortfalls. The self-critical lens filters out more balanced or positive interpretations of events, reinforcing the idea that they are continually failing. Over time, this pattern can become a cycle where hyper-self-awareness feeds a negative self-concept, and that self-concept leads to further hyper-self-awareness. Furthermore, constantly monitoring oneself depletes mental energy that could be spent on learning, problem-solving, and engaging with external realities. Human cognitive bandwidth is finite. When a large portion of it is dedicated to evaluating one's internal processes, less remains for understanding new information, building practical skills, or nurturing fulfilling pursuits. The individual may find it difficult to concentrate on professional tasks or academic endeavors, frequently distracted by their anxieties about performance, whereas moderate self-awareness might prompt small tweaks that improve productivity. Too much leads to crippling doubt and a loss of forward momentum. While self-awareness is often touted as a cornerstone of emotional intelligence and personal growth, an excessive amount can undermine mental well-being, personal relationships, and creative expression. Too much self-analysis can lead to rumination, social anxiety, stunted spontaneity, and constant self-critique. Authentic connections with others may falter as the overly self-aware person becomes consumed by their internal world. Instead of functioning as a healthy introspection that guides growth, extreme self-awareness becomes a cage, confining individuals within repetitive thoughts and persistent fears of inadequacy. The key is moderation. Self-awareness should remain a tool rather than a trap. By acknowledging the pitfalls of excessive introspection, people can cultivate a balanced sense of self that fosters mental health, nurtures genuine interpersonal bonds, and preserves the spontaneity that makes life rich and meaningful.